And then after the First World War, they go to Paris. This is a picture of him consulting with Shakespeare and Co. It's a big publishing firm now. This is when it started, and he published his works over there. And then in 40, fleeing Nazi Germany, he goes back to Zurich and dies there eventually. So this is his life, basically. I'm hoping that you got this from so what I've told you so far, that he was actually fleeing Dublin. He put himself in self-exile. He ran away from what he thought was his home, sought other homes, but still kept on writing in every and each of his works about Dublin. First of his poems, these were Chamber Music by James Joyce. He actually didn't like the title because it has nothing to do with the poems, it's love stories. But it's the first published poems. This is his first published writing works. I'm not sure how you say it. Dubliners, which I'm going to be talking about later. It's a collection of 4 stories about, well, Dublin life. And then this is a portrait of the artist as a young man, which is, he started writing this when he was in university, but he couldn't get it published. Then he rewrote it with a different title, and this is eventually what came out as his life about his younger years. And this is his only play, drama, The Exiles, and this is Ulysses, which is his most famous work. It's very long, it's very complicated. This is the top of his linguistic talent. It's filled with many characters that he took from the Dubliners, which he took from actual people in Dublin. Actually, Virag, Rudolf, it's a character of the leading character's father. He's from Szombathely, so this is the Hungarian part of the story. Very good. So basically, it's filled with these symbols and filled with every sort of connection between things that it's very hard to understand. But in the Dubliners, there are all these symbols, but it's easier to understand. So that's why I'm going to talk about that. And I'm not the one that read this, so I can't read it either. Yes. Okay, so the Dubliners. No, not the Dubliners, Dubliners, sorry. It's a collection of 15 short stories. It was, he wrote it around 1904, and he had many problems with publishing it, but eventually it was published in London in 1914. The problems with publication was that Joyce was an avant-garde. He was a modernist, a naturalistic. He used many elements from his real life, from what he experienced in Dublin, because he wanted to write this critique, or I'm not sure what he wanted to write, but he wrote this critique about what he thought Dublin was. And he used many elements, like real shops, real streets, real parks, even real companies from Dublin. And so the publishers didn't want to publish his work because of lawsuits and everything. So there were many problems with publishing it, and this gave him a lot of stress in life. And this is partly why he was drunk all the time. Okay, popular culture. This is people drinking tea, people walking across a gate, going to the theater, talking about politics, eating soup. This is popular culture, what everybody does all the time. It's these very simple parts of life, and he wrote this in his works. This was his sort of motto, that he tried to bring the reader as close to real life as possible. At least that's how I did. And yes. So he was not a discrete person. He was naturalistic. He used, another problem with publication was that he used in these stories as well, elements such as which were like undesirable human behavior. His characters, they did things that at the time everybody knew of them, of course, but they were not, through Catholic beliefs and everything, they were not accepted, like simony. This is a sin, you know, no, it's not a sin. It's when the priest or the Catholic Church sells these cards, which symbolize forgiveness. So you pay and then you're forgiven, like God's blessing. And it contains many other like unattractive human behavior, like child abuse, drunkenness, which was a very big thing in Joyce's life, gambling, prostitution, petty thievery, so people stealing, blackmail, and eventually suicide. So at the turn of the century, these ideas were very delicate. People didn't want to touch these. And then he came in with these stories, which was very, very disturbing for most of the readers, which was very interesting at the time. Okay. An evolution appears in these 15 stories. The evolution from... Okay, I'm going to show you the 15 stories. The first 3 are about children. So the main character is a child. We don't even know the name. This is sort of how to symbolize it, that it could be any child, which is a very usual thing in literature. Then the next few are about middle-aged, no, not middle-aged, like teenagers or 19 years. Evelyn is about a 19-year-old girl. So it's an evolution from children to youngsters. And then at the end, they are adults, like older people. And this is an evolution through life and even through his symbols and through his linguistic talent. The first is very simple to read. I'm going to talk about the very first story later. It's very simple to read. It's not much of a fuss to go through it. But the end, the dead, it's much more longer. It's not even a short story. It's a novella. So it's a short novel. And in the last story, his language is very dramatic and very complicated, but the first is very simple. So there is this evolution through these stories. No, I'm going to return here. He uses corruption, paralysis, and death. These 3 themes follow through in all 3 stories. I'm going to talk about these themes a little bit to sort of let you know what they mean. If you don't already know. Corruption is when something is contaminated, when something has gone wrong, it's deteriorated, it's like perversity is corruption of the soul, like moral sin. When I see somebody dying but I don't help him, I'm corrupt, I have sinned morally or something. So he uses corruption in many of these stories, nearly all of the stories. And well, it's Dubliners. So Dublin is what is corrupted in his mind and in his viewpoint. So through his symbols, he tries to show how Dublin is corrupted. He thought that Ireland was corrupted by 2 things: the Catholic Church, how it was stuck. It was sort of this thing that people couldn't escape. He was Catholic. He believed that he was Catholic. But he despised the Irish Catholic Church. So he didn't have a problem with Catholicism, he had a problem with the Catholic Church, which was a very different thing. And it sort of changed and corrupted Catholicism as a whole in his viewpoint. Then paralysis. Okay, sorry, I am going to jump back. I said that he thought that 2 things were corrupting Ireland. First was the Catholic Church, and the other was the English oppression. So England's domain, how the English came in and they sort of oppressed the people of Ireland, not able to advance globally and in their own lives. He uses paralysis, which is another theme, which is about paralysis is when you can't move, when you have a stroke, you get paralyzed. He sees Dublin and Ireland and the people as being paralyzed, not able to move or to step over the obstacles that stand around them. So it's another theme. And death, well, he uses death as a positive and a negative thing as well. Negative, of course, is because it's death, and positive because death sort of frees the soul, frees the people. So it can be used he uses it in 2 two different meanings. Spiritual death, and then there's physical death. There are only two physical deaths in the story. The very first story, the sisters, has death in it, so physical death, and the very last, the dead. You know, the title is the dead. So. Okay. So these are the themes that follow through. These are the motives that follow through in these stories. And Epiphany is sort of. I'm sure you all know what Epiphany means. I'm just going to enlighten you, because Epiphany is enlightenment. January 6th is the day of Epiphany. The Western Catholics think that this is the day when the... I'm not sure if it's the Western or the Eastern Catholics. It's written down somewhere. Sorry. Yes, so the Western Catholics think that it's when the three kings came to visit Jesus, and the Eastern Catholics think that when Jesus was baptized in the river of Jordan. So Epiphany means that it's a moment, well, other from Catholicism. It means that a moment of self-understanding, a moment of enlightenment, when you suddenly come to the point of your life that you have been stuck on, something that has been the basic point of your life, and then you suddenly understand it. So Epiphany is what follows through in all these 15 stories, and it's about this big moment in a person's life or in a society's life. Now I'm going to talk about the first story, just to give you an idea what it's like. The sisters. It's about an unnamed boy. He goes down to dinner. He lives with his uncle and his aunt, so his parents are dead. His uncle and a friend that is over for dinner, they're talking about Father Flynn, who has died. Father Flynn has died. Father Flynn was a mentor, a teacher of this unnamed child. He taught him about Catholicism, so he was his tutor. These two men, his uncle and this friend that is over to visit to tell them that Father Flynn has died, they talk about how it's sort of a good thing that Father Flynn died, because he was holding the child back. He was corrupting him with Catholicism, and he should have been out playing with the other children, but this Father Flynn character was always holding him back from that, so yes, taking away his time.